Joseph was glad he had gone to the effort of using their best china this evening. It was probably the last time his prized wedding gift would get some use, and today felt very much like a day worth celebrating. All things considered, it seemed quite apt that taking tea would be their last act as a married couple. Ritualistic even, a perfect snapshot of many happy evenings together. Joseph took pride in being just a little old-fashioned and was making tea the traditional way he had learnt as a boy. His husband's beloved Yorkshire tea bags already sat waiting in an outdated teapot alongside 2 cups, each containing just a dash of milk. He laughed at the irony of it all. It was just like any other evening from the last 30 years of their marriage. The only difference today was the government-prescribed little extra he was about to add. His hand remained steady as he poured the white, scentless powder into the teapot. There was so little. Would there really be enough? They promised it would make things painless, but how could they know for sure? It was not as though you could write a letter of complaint afterwards. Shh! He chastised himself for the unnecessary doubt. He should trust in the system as he always had. His husband called out from the lounge. "La La Land okay for you, darling?" Joseph answered back in the affirmative. It was one of their favourites, a veritable classic. They had had this same comfortable routine for 30 years now. He would dutifully make the tea, whilst Michael would browse Netflix and choose a film for them to watch. Not that Michael ever managed to finish the film, of course. He would always, without fail, fall asleep in Joseph's lap during the movie and then ask for a recap in the morning. He smiled at the thought. There would be none of that tomorrow. After setting the water to boil, Joseph's thoughts wandered to consider the utopia that had grown up around him since he was a young man. He was a true patriot and proud of his country. Low taxes, free healthcare, and free university for all, to note just a few achievements. And it was all thanks to the Retirement Prerogative Act of 2037. Joseph had always accepted the need for it. Hell, he was even old enough to have voted for it in the now heralded referendum that so spectacularly honoured the will of the people. A blinkered minority had argued that it was a too drastic solution to the chaos of overpopulation and limited resources that the world had suffered through. But not Joseph. Even now, years later, he still remembered the daily onslaught of distressing news reports documenting the barbarism rampant during the water wars, and it still made him shake a little. The tragedy of it all. So many lives lost. And for what? A cup of water? The Retirement Prerogative Act had saved the UK from all of that, and it had never frightened him. Not like the Australian annual lottery. Now that was terrifying. Joseph poured the boiled water into the teapot, picked up the tray, and walked out of the kitchen. Looking around, he was pleased with himself at how tidy the house was. He'd always thought it dreadfully important to have a clean and welcoming home for when guests arrived, even if this time he wouldn't be there to greet them himself in the morning. Stepping into the lounge, he looked at his husband, who sat waiting on the couch. It still took a breath away quite how handsome he was, even after his 70th birthday 12 days ago. He was still as striking as the first day he had laid eyes on him those many years ago. A first date on a cold November's morning. They had met online the old-fashioned way people did back then, using something called Tinder. Little did he know that he was meeting the man he would spend the rest of his life with. They had both very much enjoyed the allotted 5 years of retirement granted to you by the Retirement Bureau, but now that was over. The government graciously allowed you a grace period of 2 weeks after your 70th birthday to get your affairs in order. So technically, Michael still had 2 days to go before he was obliged to make his exit. but they had both agreed that there was no point in delaying the inevitable. They were ready. And today had been such a beautifully sunny day, a fresh and pleasant heat, not that stuffy humidity common this time of year. So they had thought, why not leave on a high note? In theory, Joseph knew that he could wait around for another 2 months before receiving his own powder in the post. But there was absolutely nothing unusual in him signing the prerogative waiver early to allow him to leave with his husband. No point in counting down the clock alone. Joseph sat and turned on the film as Michael poured the tea for them both. As they drank and finished their cups, he noted that neither of them spoke. He guessed there was nothing left to say. The love in their eyes said it all. Joseph was surprised at how quickly the tea affected them. He immediately felt sleepy, and Michael had already laid his head in his lap. Closing his eyes, he allowed his thoughts to drift, his memories of their time together unfolding before him and screened against the darkness of his mind like one of their favourite Netflix movies. Comfortable. He observed from a distance his younger self take his husband's hand for the first time. He smiled as he saw their first kiss. He winced slightly, feeling the pain of an old scar as he watched them being told they were not eligible to adopt, and felt a tear roll down his cheek as he saw them hold each other as they cried all through that dreadful night. He watched it all, again and again, the happy and the sad, now vaguely aware of how still his husband had become, and like a voice from a far-off distance. As a white light flooded his last thread of consciousness, he heard himself say that he was right to have trusted them. It really was painless. So beautifully painless.